Welcome to the deep dive. We're here to really break things open, get past the surface, and give you those key insights fast.
Yeah, the actionable stuff.
Exactly. If you're someone who just loves learning, loves growing, thinking deeper, well, you're in the right place.
This is definitely the community for that.
So today, we're diving deep into the core ideas of the lean startup. Our mission: to pull out the essential knowledge from Eric Ries' audiobook transcript, things you can actually use, for real impact.
And it's interesting, right off the bat, people think lean startup, they think tech startups in a garage.
Right, the stereotype.
But the principles,
Yeah.
they're showing up everywhere. Big companies, established players.
Yeah.
They're using this thinking too.
Totally. And you mentioned Ries. It started from a place that's actually really relatable. Frustration. He was a programmer doing things the right way, working incredibly hard. And products were still failing. That feeling of wasted effort, we've all been there.
Oh, absolutely. Pouring your heart into something and nothing. That frustration wasn't just personal, though. It really sparked a whole new way of thinking about how we build things, how we innovate.
Okay, so Ries, coming from that engineering background, his first instinct was probably, okay, this is a technical problem.
Right. You need better code, streamline the process, that kind of thing.
But then the light bulb moment.
Yeah, realizing that, technical skill alone wasn't enough. You had to understand the business side, the marketing, the customer. That was just as critical, maybe even more so.
And that connects to Steve Blank, right? His whole customer development idea.
Exactly. Blank was a huge influence. He brought this rigorous, almost scientific method to the business side of things. Not just having an idea, but really testing if anyone actually wanted it.
Injecting some discipline into the chaos?
Precisely. That systematic approach became like a cornerstone for what Ries was building.
So if we boil it down, what's the absolute core problem the lean startup is trying to solve?
It's the brutal failure rate of new things, startups, new products. So many just don't make it.
Yeah.
And think about all the wasted resources, time, money, passion, skills. Just gone. It's actually kind of staggering when you think about it.
And for anyone listening who really wants to turn knowledge into power, like we talk about here, that level of waste, it just feels wrong. There has to be a better way.
That's exactly it. The lean startup is fundamentally about finding a more efficient, less wasteful path to building things people actually want.
The name itself, lean,
Yeah.
it pulls directly from manufacturing, doesn't it?
Oh, absolutely. You go back to Toyota, Taitio no Shigo Shingo, that whole revolution.
What were the key ideas there?
Well, things like really valuing the knowledge of the workers on the line, using small batch sizes instead of huge production runs, just-in-time production.
Right, minimizing inventory, getting rid of anything that didn't add value.
Exactly, identifying value versus waste. The lean startup basically adapts those core ideas for the unpredictable world of innovation and entrepreneurship.
But instead of, cars rolling off the line, what's the product you're measuring?
That's the key shift. It's not about just making stuff. The measure of progress becomes validated learning.
Okay, break that down. Validated learning.
It means learning that's proven by real data from real customers. Seeing positive changes in your core metrics because of something you did. It's empirical evidence, not just, hope or guessing.
So it's not about just sticking to the plan you wrote 6 months ago or hitting a certain feature count or staying under budget necessarily.
Exactly, because you could do all those things perfectly and still be building something nobody cares about. Ries uses the example of IMVU early on.
Right.
They were improving the product, making it better, technically speaking, but their key business metrics flatlined, no real growth, no change in user behavior.
So all that efficient building was kind of pointless if it wasn't creating actual value for the customer.
That's the harsh truth. Learning what customers actually value, that's the real unit of progress for a startup.
And that reframes waste too, doesn't it? Waste isn't just bad code.
Right. Waste is anything you do that doesn't contribute to that validated learning. Features nobody uses. Waste. Time spent on a strategy based on a wrong assumption. Waste. Building stuff before you know if anyone wants it. Big waste.
Which leads to this idea of running experiments before you build the whole thing, like that thought experiment.
The mock download, yeah, just putting up a button saying download feature X to see if anyone clicks before you spend weeks coding it. Test the hypothesis first.
And that's different from just asking people in a survey, would you like this?
Totally different. People are notoriously bad at predicting their own future behavior. You need to see what they actually do, not just what they say they'll do. Observe the behavior.
Okay, so this methodology arrives during what Ries calls this unprecedented worldwide entrepreneurial renaissance. Lots of activity.
But not really a solid management framework designed for that kind of risky, innovative venture. We were using old maps for new territory.
And it makes this great point that it's not just startups. People inside big companies trying to innovate, they're entrepreneurs too.
Absolutely. Entrepreneurs. They face the same uncertainty, the same need to validate ideas, often with added layers of bureaucracy.
He tells that story about Mark, right? A manager in a big company.
Yeah, Mark got the need for innovation, had the vision, but vision alone wasn't enough. He needed the how, the management principles to navigate the uncertainty.
Vision isn't a strategy.
Exactly, you need the framework.
And then there's Intuit, a big established company actively trying to build this entrepreneurial muscle internally.
Right. With TurboTax, they went from a more traditional model to running like over 500 experiments in one tax season.
500, that's insane.
Yeah, something like 70 tests a week at peak. It's all about rapid iteration, constant learning from the market.
Scott Cook, Intuit's founder, had that great quote about it. He said, if you bet the farm on one big project, you create politicians who sell ideas internally. But if you run lots of small tests, everyone gets a shot, and you create entrepreneurs who run and learn. The data decides.
That's such a powerful shift from internal persuasion to external validation. And Cook pointed out, this isn't just for tech companies. Any business with a website can do this kind of fast cycle testing.
But Ries acknowledges this is tough for leaders, for middle managers maybe used to big upfront plans and analysis.
Oh, for sure. It requires a different mindset.
What?
Less about predicting the future, more about discovering it through experiments.
And Ries argues pretty strongly that this capacity for constant innovation, this innovation factory built on lean principles, is basically the only sustainable path for long-term growth.
You have to build a system for ongoing innovation, embedded in the company culture.
Intuit even tracks it, right? With metrics like...
Yeah, number of customers using new products, revenue from those new offerings, and the results were dramatic. They cut the time to get a new product to $50 million in revenue from like 5.5 years down to just 12 months.
Wow, that's transformative.
Totally. And the key takeaway for leaders is that their job is to create the conditions, the systems that allow that rapid experimentation to happen.
Okay, so let's get into the nuts and bolts. The core engine. The build, measure, learn loop. How does that work?
It's pretty straightforward conceptually. Build. You turn an idea into some kind of product, even a very simple one. Measure. You see how customers respond, collect data, get feedback, learn. You analyze that data and decide whether to change direction or keep going.
Idea bin, product data, learn, repeat.
Exactly. And the key is minimizing the total time it takes to go through that loop. Faster cycles mean faster learning, faster adaptation. That's how you navigate uncertainty.
Speed as a strategy. This feels very aligned with getting knowledge quickly, thoroughly, like we aim for here.
Definitely.
But before you even build anything, you have these fundamental assumptions. The leap of faith ones.
Right. These are the absolute bedrock beliefs your whole venture rests on.
Yeah.
If these are wrong, nothing else matters. Ries focuses on two big ones.
Which?
The value hypothesis. Do customers actually find this valuable? Does it solve a real problem or fulfill a real need for them?
Okay, value. And the second?
The growth hypothesis. How will new customers discover this? How will it spread? What's the engine that will drive growth?
So value and growth, the absolute must be truths.
You got it. And to test these critical assumptions as fast and cheaply as possible, you build a minimum viable product, the MVP.
And the MVP isn't the final polished dream product. It's minimal.
Exactly. Think of it as the simplest possible experiment that lets you get through one full build, measure, learn cycle to a specific hypothesis. Its goal isn't perfection, it's learning.
Learning is the point. He even says sometimes you got to just try and sell the really basic version.
Yeah, because getting someone to actually pull out their wallet or even just commit time or data, that's a much stronger signal of real interest than just saying, yeah, cool idea.
Okay, so you build the MVP, you put it out there. How do you know if you're actually learning anything useful? If you're making progress? Gut feel.
No. That's where innovation accounting comes in. It's a more disciplined way to measure.
Right, quantitative.
It helps you see if the changes you're making, the engine tuning, are actually improving things. It lets you set up learning milestones instead of just traditional business plan milestones.
And avoid the dreaded vanity metrics.
Oh yeah. Big difference between vanity metrics stuff that looks good but doesn't mean much, like total signups, and actionable metrics numbers that reflect real user behavior and give you insight into whether your hypotheses are right or wrong.
Okay, so you build, you measure using innovation accounting, you learn, and then you hit a fork in the road.
The big decision: pivot or persevere.
Based on the learning, do you stick with the current strategy, persevere, or do you make a significant structured change, pivot? Because a core hypothesis turned out to be wrong.
Exactly. If the data says your fundamental assumption is flawed, you need to pivot.
And getting that data, understanding those assumptions, involves actually talking to people, right? Getting out of the building, GOTE.
Absolutely critical. It echoes that Toyota principle, Genchi Genbutsu. Go and see for yourself. You can't figure out customer needs from inside your office.
Like Scott Cook cold calling people about personal finance back in the day.
That's the perfect example. Direct, unfiltered input. That early contact tells you which assumptions are riskiest and need testing now. Your idea of the perfect customer, that's just a hypothesis until you validate it.
Okay, let's talk MVPs in action. Groupon is a classic example.
Yeah, started as the point. And their MVP was incredibly simple. A WordPress blog, some manually created PDFs for the deals. Super basic.
And their first idea wasn't even coupons, right? It was something else.
Collective activism. Try to get groups together to achieve a goal. That didn't really catch on. But through that simple MVP, they stumbled onto the group coupon idea. That was the pivot.
And that took off. So the MVP wasn't the smallest possible thing, but the fastest way to learn if the core idea or a variation of it worked.
Precisely. Fastest path to validated learning.
And it's really about finding those early adopters first.
Yes. The people who have the problem so acutely that they'll tolerate an imperfect solution. They're desperate for something.
And anything you build beyond what they need at that early stage is just
waste. Yeah. Which can be hard for perfectionists, right?
Yeah.
Launching something rough.
Definitely. But the goal is learning. Like Dropbox. They didn't even have the product ready at first, did they?
Nope. They made a video, just a simple video, showing how it would work. And the signups flooded in. That validated the core value proposition before they tackled all the complex tech. That was their MVP.
Or the concierge MVP, like that laundry service example where the founder did everything manually at first.
Manual's laundry. Yeah, he was the service. Picked up clothes, washed them, folded them, delivered them, all himself. To learn exactly what customers wanted, every step, before building any automation. Learn first, scale later.
So MVPs can look really different, but the goal is always that rapid learning, which raises the quality question again. Does MVP mean low quality?
It's a common question. But the lean startup view is, if you don't know who your customer is or what they truly value, you don't actually know what quality is for them.
Okay.
So a slightly rough MVP can actually help you discover what aspects of quality matter most. Is it speed, reliability, a specific feature, ease of use?
Like the IMVU teleportation feature. It was simple, maybe less polished than the travel idea.
But it solved the core user need, connecting quickly with others much better. Customers value the solution, not necessarily the complex implementation.
So it's not against high quality eventually.
Not at all. It's about prioritizing learning what quality means first. You definitely want to avoid bugs or issues that actively prevent learning or slow down the build, measure, learn loop. But extra polish, that doesn't help you learn. That can wait.
A good rule of thumb he suggests is, if a feature, activity, or effort doesn't contribute directly to learning right now, cut it from the MVP.
Ruthlessly prioritize learning.
But building that raw MVP, it can feel risky. People worry about legal stuff, competitors stealing the idea, damaging the brand.
Yeah, those fears are real. Reels addresses them, the competitor thing. Your real advantage isn't secrecy, it's learning faster.
Okay.
Branding risk. Maybe launch the MVP under a different name initially. Legal. Obviously, do necessary diligence, but don't let hypothetical future problems paralyze you from learning now.
And sometimes the MVP is just uncomfortable. It's reality hitting the grand vision.
It can be, especially for visionaries. But it's necessary. And the key is committing to iterate. The first MVP might fail in terms of market traction, but it succeeds if you learn from it.
Which loops us back again to innovation accounting, measuring that learning objectively.
Right, avoiding those vanity metrics. Things like total registered users might go up, but if nobody's sticking around or engaging, that's not real progress.
You need the actionable metrics. Churn rate, conversion rates for specific actions, engagement frequency, stuff that shows if user behavior is actually changing in positive ways.
IMVU's early grats are the cautionary tale. Gross numbers looked okay, maybe even good. But cohort analysis, looking at how groups of users behaved over time, showed the underlying problems. People weren't sticking.
So innovation accounting has those 3 steps. Establish the baseline.
Yep, know where you are now with your key actionable metrics.
Then tune the engine.
Make specific changes, product features, marketing campaigns designed explicitly to improve one of those key metrics. Treat everything as an experiment.
And finally, pivot or persevere.
Look at the results of your tuning experiments. Did the metric improve significantly? If yes, persevere, keep optimizing. If no, or not enough, it's time to consider a pivot. The data guides the decision.
And when the quantitative data looks bad, that's the cue to do more qualitative work.
Exactly, go talk to customers. But now your conversations are much more focused. It's not just what do you want, it's we tried X to improve Y metric, but it didn't work. Can you help us understand why?
That changes the conversation entirely.
Totally. It led IMVU to realize their core problem wasn't the features, but their fundamental model as an IM add-on. That led to the big pivot to a standalone network.
It highlights that difference between optimizing and learning. You can optimize a broken engine all day long.
It's still a broken engine. You need to learn if you've even got the right engine first. Optimization comes later. You need clear predictions up front to know if you're actually learning or just spinning your wheels.
Rocket is another interesting case study here, wasn't it? They were doing Agile, seemed productive.
Yeah, they were shipping code, doing user stories, short iterations. Looked good on the surface. But they had this nagging doubt. Were these features actually driving the growth they needed?
Because they were initially looking at
Vanity metrics, mostly. Total users, total questions answered. Big numbers, but not necessarily indicative of sustainable value or growth.
So they shifted.
They shifted to cohort analysis and, crucially, split testing, A/B testing.
Okay, how did that help?
Split testing lets you isolate the impact of one specific change. You show version A to one group, version B to another, and see which performs better on your key metric. It gives you clear cause and effect.
So you know if that new feature actually moved the needle.
Exactly.
Oh.
And they tested everything, even stuff that seemed like an obvious best practice, like making registration super easy, lazy registration.
Yeah.
The data showed it didn't actually help their core engagement metrics as much as they assumed. Data trumped intuition. This rigor also changed the engineering culture, more focused on testing hypotheses.
Which brings us fully to the pivot. It's not just changing something random.
No, it's a structured course correction. It's specifically testing a new fundamental hypothesis about the product, the business model, or the engine of growth based on what you learn.
But it's not a magic formula, right? Emphasizes that.
Right. Judgment, experience, qualitative insight, they still matter hugely. But the framework helps you recognize when a pivot is needed and structure the change. Failing to pivot when you should, that leads to the land of the living dead.
The company that just exists but isn't going anywhere.
Burning cash, burning energy, not making progress. Vodafone is a good example of an early pivot. David Benetti tested the broad social network idea, saw it wasn't working, and quickly pivoted to the focused voter contact tool based on MVP feedback.
What stops people from pivoting when they should?
Lots of things. Clinging to vanity metrics that make things look okay, having unclear hypotheses so the results are ambiguous, and just fear of admitting the original idea was wrong.
Even high-profile startups like Path, though, they showed courage by releasing an MVP despite the spotlight.
Yeah, embracing the learning process publicly takes guts, but it's often the right move. Ries recommends having regular pivot or persevere meetings.
Bringing everyone together, product, business leaders.
To look at the data from innovation accounting, review the customer conversations, consider the market, and make that call. Do we stay the course or make a fundamental change?
Wealthfront had a pretty dramatic pivot, didn't they?
Huge. They realized they were solving a real problem, investment management, but for the wrong customer segment. They shifted focus from older, affluent individuals to younger, tech-savvy professionals. Different needs, different product, different marketing.
Which highlights that what works for early adopters might be totally wrong for the mainstream market later.
Absolutely. A pivot often means finding a new set of early adopters for your revised strategy and starting the learning process with them.
Whereas even catalogs different types of pivots.
Yeah, zoom in, zoom out, customer segment, customer need, platform, business architecture. Lots of ways a strategy can change. But the key is, each pivot is a new hypothesis.
And what do you do with a new hypothesis?
You build a new MVP to test it. The cycle begins again.
So we've journeyed from those initial risky assumptions through building MVPs to test them, using innovation accounting and actionable metrics to measure progress, and making that critical pivot or persevere decision. It's all about structured learning.
Exactly. Learning and adapting in the face of that inherent uncertainty.
And that's really the heart of it, isn't it? The Lean Startup gives you this powerful toolkit for learning, for adapting, for navigating the unknown. Whether you're literally in a startup or trying to innovate inside a big company, or even just working on a personal project that involves uncertainty.
These principles, validated learning, build, measure, learn, MVPs, pivoting based on evidence, they're incredibly versatile. They help you move beyond just guessing.
It's about getting real data, making informed choices, and reducing that wasted effort we talked about at the start, turning that knowledge into actual power for transformation.
Right. Embracing the uncertainty as a chance to learn and refine rather than just hoping your initial guess was right.
So a final thought for everyone listening. Think about an area in your work or even your life where you might be operating more on assumptions than on validated learning. Where could you run a small experiment, get some real feedback, and apply these lean principles to maybe get clearer insights and move forward faster?
It's about cultivating that experimental mindset. What's the core assumption? How can I test it quickly and cheaply? What will I measure?
This has been fascinating, really digging into these core concepts. If this deep dive has got you thinking and you want to go even deeper, definitely check out the full audiobook or text of Eric Ries, The Lean Startup.
There's a lot more nuance and detail in there.
Absolutely. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Remember, we're all about breaking open ideas to unlock that real-life transformation. If you love learning and growing, make sure you're subscribed. Let's keep turning knowledge into power together.